Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Doug Haney. I'm Executive Director of Polyphony Music Resources, and I'm really happy today to be spending some time in conversation with three wonderful colleagues who are joining me to talk about a topic. And I'll talk about the topic in just a minute. First of all, I want to introduce Tracy Jernigan, who's at First Baptist Church, Wilmington, North Carolina. Chip Handrich at Second Baptist Church, Liberty, Missouri. Chip, wave at us there. And David Warren, First Baptist Church, Roswell, Georgia, just north of Atlanta. Thank you so much, David, Tracy, and Chip, for joining me today in this conversation. It is not uncommon that my phone will ring and I will hear on the other end of the line a pastor who says, "I'm pastor of," sorry about that, First Baptist Church, Gun Barrel City, Texas. Well, maybe not. And they are looking for a church musician, but they're looking for a very specialized kind of church musician, someone who is able to both lead traditional worship very well and someone who is able to lead a modern or contemporary service very well and with the same kind of passion and perspective. And I've brought together these three colleagues today to talk about this topic because honestly, pastors tell me they are having difficulty finding people who can do both things, who in a sense speak both worship languages. My colleagues who are here today are each of them able to do this, and I think able to speak to and give advice to pastors and search committees who were looking for this kind of person to join their ministry team. So we're just going to have a conversation today. I guess if you need a title for this video, maybe it is Wanted Church Musician to Lead Traditional and Modern Contemporary Worship. And so I again welcome my colleagues to this conversation. And we're going to start with a pretty basic question. And that is, for any church who is grappling with this personnel decision, they need to go back and take a look at their structure of their worship services, right? Is it two services or is it one? And what should it be? And so I'd like to invite any of you to begin to talk about the structure of worship in this kind of scenario. Who'd like to begin?
I will. I think it's important for the pastor or the search team or whatever the structure for this search is to think about the current situation at the church. Are you moving? Did you just have one person doing both styles and that person resigned and so you're just trying to replace them? Or have you had two people, one doing each style, and then you're looking at combining that position? I think it's important to really talk through what has been working and what hasn't worked, or what are you interested in looking into. And obviously, if you had two and then you still have one in one position, then what does it look like to add someone else, and who is under who, and that sort of thing. In my current situation, the church had two people, and they were really interested. They both resigned, and they were interested in looking into what it looks like to have one worship minister that did both styles, and they knew that was hard to find, but they also knew that they didn't necessarily need to have the person lead the modern service. It was important that the person led the choir and led the traditional service, but it could be a person who informed the worship band, who equipped them. It didn't need to be a young male with a guitar standing up front leading the modern. It was just someone who could give some theological guidance and an educated worship planner to do that. So that was where they came from. I actually do end up leading the modern a lot of the time, but a lot of the time I don't. I'm equipping our volunteers and our singers and that sort of thing. So looking at what's been working, what do you want to improve on, and having an open discussion about that.
Tracy, I wanted to especially go back to the point about who is supervising whom. Is that something that search committees need to really nail down and pay attention to?
Yeah, and I think some of that can come from when it's important that they find the right person for their church. So you want to make sure, even if you found the right the perfect musician, they've got to be a good fit for your church. So I will say that having one person, one worship minister brings a lot of unity to the entire worship ministry. When you have two different people, things fall between the cracks. You know, whose responsibility is it to do the Maundy Thursday service? You know, what are we going to collaborate on, and what are we going to keep separate? So having one person is really great for the congregation too, because they can see, oh, there's our steady, and there's the person that we rely on as our worship minister. Now I do think that you can have someone who plays that role but only leads one style and plans one style, and then hire whatever that person's weaknesses are, hire someone to help with the other areas. And obviously that would be not really in charge of it, someone who's mentoring that person and has the final, vision for the ministry.
Great. Chip, David, what would you add to that?
Yeah,
I'll
just
go.
go ahead.
In my case, I've been doing both traditional and contemporary for about almost 25 years. And they were two different. One church they tried to blend, which didn't go all that well. That was while I was finishing up graduate school, and then the next two churches, I was leading both in two different services, both traditional and contemporary. And the current church I am, that we started a contemporary church service just before the pandemic. It's not a huge service, but it is one that just gives people who are more comfortable with that particular type of music an alternative to go to. And we found that we needed that alternative, even if it's 40 people and that's fine, because it speaks to those people who may not have felt at home in the traditional service, which is our largest. So again, in my case, I've been doing both. And the church I served in Maryland for 12 years, we had a full worship band. And the church I am now, it's myself on guitar, a bass player, piano, and a percussionist. So it can look like a lot of different things. The other thing I think that is necessary, if somebody's doing both, they need to understand the vocal styles of both. What makes a classical sound different than a contemporary sound? And how do you pedagogically teach that to people who need to know that? You can't sing contemporary music with a classical sound. It just doesn't work. So those are just maybe a couple of things to look for as you're looking for someone.
I would say as we look at the structure, of these positions, and as you think about this, I'll kind of in sum to what Tracy said and what Chip has both said here. You want to make sure that you're looking for, well, asking the question really, is this someone who we can find one person to do multiple jobs, or is this a situation where we need to find, a team to put together, but still someone, I think it's at the end of the day, someone needs to be kind of a decision making or a decision maker. Someone needs to, have a long-term vision and a unified worship vision for the church. As Tracy said, that does nothing but helps your congregation more than trying to find two different competing voices. You essentially kind of set yourself up for a lot more headache and a lot more hurt and a lot more disunity than you do the intended unity in your congregation. I think it's important, as I would always advocate, and as any of us would, we all are here advocating for church musicians to be well loved and taken care of and given places to thrive and to grow in their ministry. And even in multi-led worship settings, you don't want to sacrifice worship philosophy or theology or practice and abilities for just the sake of having someone who fits a bill and matches what you hear on K-Love and what you hear on the radio. You want to make sure that that your church is well served by a pastoral presence or by a leader who is supported by a pastoral presence in our worship areas. Doug, I think too, maybe we've been polite to not say this, but an underlying issue in the conversation for how you want to hire this goes along with what is the financial state of your church at this point too. Can you afford 2 worship leaders, 2 worship pastors? Can you only afford 1 worship minister that oversees multiple worship expressions? Certainly I don't think we would on this conversation support or encourage you to, to supplement someone in a very minimally supported role and someone else. We want to make sure that we would encourage you to support all those that you've called to come serve at your church and to do it well. That way they can support you in turn well.
And I'll throw out there that having a person in each role, having 2 people as worship ministers can work, and it actually did work well before I came to this church, because they worked well together. But one of the issues was that the church was unable financially to help them grow as they stayed here longer. They weren't able to increase their salary and give them bigger budgets and that sort of thing. So having 2 people, I don't want anyone to think, well, Tracy thinks you only need 1, but having 2 people can work. I feel like it's tricky, but when it came to hiring the next person, the committee realized, it might be time for us to look for that 1 person again and bring back some unity to the church and the ministry.
Nice. Well, that's a great starting point, I think, and pretty fundamental to the conversation, right? Foundational to make some of these decisions and to grapple with them on the front end. Someone said something about, I think Chip eloquently said, classical vocal style and contemporary vocal style they're simply different nuances, and there's different approaches to pedagogy. I wonder if we can take just a couple of minutes and challenge the common assumption that, I'm going to put it in silly terms, a musician is a musician is a musician. Right? I recently saw the movie Maestro, which is actually an amazing biopic of Leonard Bernstein, but also very painful to watch because of Bernstein's own demons. And there were very few Bernsteins in the classical world who could go conduct the New York Philharmonic and then also go to a jazz club. So I use that as a bit of an analogy. It's a bit of a stretch, but I think it's apt. Could just a couple of you talk about, just very briefly, what are the different sorts of skills that are required for the traditional musician versus the modern contemporary musician? And obviously we're just going to speak to this just very briefly. Anyone? Chip, you want to say a little more about that?
Sure. If you're looking for someone that's going to do both, they're going to have some choral skills. They're going to have some choral pedagogy skills for sure. But then they're also going to have to be able to maybe take some folks that only have done classical, that want to do contemporary, and help them figure out, now, how do I change my voice style to make it match? There has been a great debate over the years, even the classical and Broadway and all that classical was called legit, and there are some Broadway shows that are called legit. That is an unfortunate name that stuck, because it almost sounds like those are the only ones that are legitimate. Whereas rock styles, other styles, they are just as legitimate. They're just different ways of production, vocal production. So it is someone that has to kind of know the language of both of those and how to do it. Also, possibly someone that can lead with guitar or piano. In our particular church, we have a lot of classically trained pianists, and I have 2 people in all of those that I can hand a chord chart to, and they can play. So you got to kind of look at that.
Chip, what's a chord chart?
It's just, thank you. I should define that. Thank you. It's just words with chord symbols on them. That's all. And
you don't see all the notes, do you?
You don't see them, right? I've got an incredible accompanist, and she will tell you, you hand me a chord chart, I don't know what to do with it. Because she sight reads incredibly every note, but not. So it's just, those are kind of the things you start to run into when you begin to develop a contemporary service that you've not had one before, and don't have the people in your congregation that go to that, because we've been leaning classical all these years. So so if you can have somebody that can lead with guitar or piano, they need to be able to do both of that, the choral aspect and the contemporary aspect too. So I know
Yeah.
that's a tall order, but
Sure. Sure. Anybody want to add anything to that? Just very briefly. I think it's just important to uh, uh, camp there for just a second.
Yeah, I would just underscore, as you're looking at the needs of both of your worship expressions, that really defines what the need of the person leading that you have. As a more traditional worship setting, you obviously have ensembles like handbells, choir, orchestra, children's choirs, what have you. There are a certain set of needs and skills that are needed to accurately and adequately support the people gathered in those ensembles, just like in a or modern worship expression, whether that's band led or a roots group, however that looks in your context. Certain skill sets are needed, also technology and your worshiping resources and more traditionals, circumstances and settings. You have hymnals still and are using that, or versus a more modern setting when you're using a lot more technology. The needs of those are a lot of crossover happens, but still pretty specific. And so finding someone who's able to be conversant in those needs.
Yeah.
And I'd add that you need, if you're hiring two people who have the specific skill set for each service, you need to make sure they have a minister's heart as well, because they'll be pastoring those groups. And if you hire one person, you need to make sure that they have not just the skill sets for each style, but a passion and a love for each style. Because if any group feels like they're being unevenly treated or weighted, then you have a problem.
Well said. Yeah. Yeah.
very well said. Yep.
Yeah. So let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about, okay, the search committee has sort of established or at least affirmed their worship structure, and you understand that these are common musical skill sets and yet diverse and distinctive kinds of skills that are required. Let's talk about what it looks like for a search committee to maybe define goals and be clear among themselves what are their own needs and expectations for this position. Tracy, you wanna pick it up from there?
Sure. Yeah, I would say if the search committee knows exactly what they want, put that in the job description. If they're open to multiple options, such as we're looking for either this case or this case, put that in there as well, just so that people know you may take people out of the running or out of interest if they think you'll only settle for one thing. So I would just be open with what you're open to and exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, I would say, and to touch back on what Tracy just said in the previous kind of prompt, Doug, would be as you're looking for your assumptions, in two different realms, you do want to make sure that you're looking for someone with a pastoral heart, or if you are dividing a position or going with two different, are you looking for simply a leader, simply someone to be a pragmatic and practical musician to lead an ensemble, or are you looking for a theologically minded worship planner or someone who is thinking ahead in terms of pastoral leadership or working in greater circles at the church context that they're at?
And maybe you're not looking for a a person to join the pastoral staff. Maybe you are just looking for that someone to handle the worship responsibilities, but they don't need to be a part of the staff, of the pastoral staff. Those are some things to look at. And I would also say, be very, very, very clear in the job description. Don't be ambiguous in that at all. And so that means meeting together and knowing exactly what you want in that position before you ever put that out onto the internet.
Nice. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Clarity is one of the keys to the kingdom, right?
Right.
Mhm.
This was several years ago. I candidated at a church and they knew I didn't have great piano skills and they thought it wasn't important to them because they had other pianists. But after I got there and left, they all got together and decided, yeah, I guess it's more important than we thought. So
Hmm.
those are some things to think about ahead of time. So you don't waste the time of the person or waste your money bringing them on and then finding out after they're there, yeah, it was a bigger thing than I thought we needed. So
Mhm.
whatever that may be.
Right, right, right. So the job description really becomes an important tool for staff and search committee, but ultimately for candidates
Mm.
to clarify expectations and to make sure that people are on the same page. Obviously, there's more to it. I worked with a pastor a long time who he used to describe the search committee process of a minister coming with a new group of people, and I think his quip was, you hope eventually it goes from this sort of transactional experience to the sparks of love begin to fly. But that's further down the road. I think early on, it's really important to be clear. What are the expectations? And that really serves all parties.
Mhm.
So maybe we've gotten that far in the process with the search committee. How does a search committee, how does a senior pastor find a candidate like this? Any ideas, folks?
I think Doug
Silence.
I think Doug, as you've said here in our opening kind of mantra for the video, a lot of what is happening that I'm seeing, I'm sure that Tracy and Chip can speak to this too, is word of mouth kind of referrals. It's pastors calling current church music practitioners out in the field and saying, do you know someone? Is someone interested in doing multiple styles or a particular style? Unfortunately, I think coming out of our schools, unlike 40 and 50 years ago, the unicorn candidate, that is conversant in every which way and, is the perfect fit in every worship circumstance, probably is truly a unicorn and is probably hidden away more than they are openly present in candidate pools. But that's not to say, that there are plenty of candidates who can do multiple styles. As I've come to find out, I think there are many church musicians who are willing to explore being conversant in multiple styles, who just need some resourcing, who need some support, who needs space to explore if that part of that call exists. I don't know if it's as unicorn or as infrequent to find them, but I think maybe more of the space to explore and to let them explore if they're able to do multiple styles is maybe the lessening part currently.
Yeah, and I would say also don't give up on the internet search places like Church Jobs, and because that's how I found this position. It was through the internet. Uh, it was not word of mouth. So, those are still out there. There are people searching and they go to those particular job sites to take a look and certainly post it on those as well.
Do you remember what was it, Indeed, or do you remember what the platform was?
No, I think it was churchjobs.net. I just don't remember.
Oh,
There was a time when I was looking a lot, and since I got here, I haven't even looked at all. So,
good to know,
I
Chip.
don't,
Good
I
to
don't
know.
remember. I just don't remember. But it was one of those. There are several of them out there. Church job posting websites.
Mhm.
And you can be very, very specific on those, and someone types in a search as to what they're looking for. Yours can come up. So,
Yep, that sounds familiar, churchjobs.net. I think also Worship Leader Magazine used to have their own, but I think now it directs to somewhere else. So Google Worship Leader Magazine job openings, something like that. And I agree. Even when I am not looking for jobs, I like to go see what people are calling their positions and what it includes, even just to further enhance what I'm doing and what I'm calling things. So sometimes people are just looking out there for fun. So having it on those internet sites is good, and it's really, that goes back and forth between both styles too. I would say lean into denominational resources if the church is part of a denomination. Obviously, we have CBF ties, and they have job boards. We have Polyphony Music Resources and Doug Haney, and so that leans to a certain kind of moderate kind of church. Also, the other organizations like the Presbyterians have worship networks, so look within those denominational networks if they're a part of one. And then also the seminaries will often send out postings so pastors can get those, or even applicants from seminaries that align with their theological ideals.
Right, and in the CBF, when I was actually looking about 6 years ago, you not only have the national, but then you have some very strong state organizations. North Carolina posts theirs, and Georgia posts theirs, and I don't remember which other ones do. Not all states post theirs, because like in our region, we have 5 states, rather than North Carolina that has 1. So be sure to look at different states and at their postings too, because they have people who are looking.
And Doug, I would chime in too, kind of another place to look, and this might resemble kind of what Tracy's circumstance is at her current congregation, but don't be afraid to look within your own congregation too, depending on what you are looking at. There may be well-qualified musicians in your own context that are wading in the weeds, that just need maybe need a pastoral presence or need a mentorship. Maybe you have a very gifted church musician who's in a position already, and you need someone to step alongside to lead the modern worship experience at your church. Maybe what you're not looking for is someone to stand up and be the worship leader in that service, but you're looking to help someone train someone else to be an active leader, to walk alongside in worship planning, to walk alongside how to lead a band or how to lead a choir. Maybe you might look and see if there's a music educator in your congregation, or a retired musician who has got some skills that might be useful to your context.
Thank you. Great ideas. The only thing I would add to that is occasionally I hear from a pastor friend, and I actually have a lot of friends who are senior pastors. No laughter required. Who say, sometimes they hire a part-time person because, again, those are the resources they have at their church. And while there are very fine music educators, they may be missing that theological training that many of us have had, fortunately, and now in this world of varied kinds of training for church music, sometimes that theological pastoral piece is missing. And I would say, again, that can be overcome, but if that's important to your church for this role, then you need to clarify that on the front end, A. And you could, though, encourage a candidate who maybe has a little bit of a gap to find that training either online or in a nearby seminary or divinity school, if you're lucky enough to be, close to one. I would just say, again, it's all about clarifying expectations and what your church needs and wants. So we're coming to the end of the process and the video, believe it or not. And what about when we get to the point of interviewing these kinds of folks? Let's talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about the call weekend before we wrap up here. Interviewing, what's important to pay attention to?
Ask them to do their thing.
Okay.
If they're being hired to lead a choir and to lead a band, have them use the team, the search team, and use them as the choir and the band, and see them do what they do, so that that they can do it. I would also say have representation on that team of the groups that you expect that person to lead. Don't have the entire band on that team. It's too many people, but have a group of people that are respected from the choir or the band on that search team for the interview.
Wow.
I would also say it's really important to not put this person in front of one of the ensembles and say, tell us if you want this person. That will go poorly, most likely. Leave it to that small group to decide. This is just in my experience and what I've heard. you can get it, you can have a mutiny on your hands if you put it in the hands of too many people.
And you're talking about though before the call weekend? Is this apart from the call weekend, just to be clear?
Yes. Well, yes. This is the interview.
Is it we're interviewing? Yeah.
Yes. And then if before you're presenting this, if you've decided on this person and you're presenting this person for a call weekend, be careful who you give the opportunity to give input to this person.
So real quickly, my process started with a questionnaire and then was chosen from that questionnaire. We did probably 3 or 4 Zoom interviews. At one point we met in person only because we happened to be visiting my wife's mother, who's 3 hours from here. So we actually met in person. I don't know that that's totally necessary if you can do it by Zoom with the committee. And then I would say be very keep in touch with whatever candidate it is. Don't let weeks and weeks and weeks go by without ever letting them know, hey, we're still in the process. Just be patient with us. Whatever you need to do, just don't leave them hanging, because that could be a very stressful for the person that's candidating. And maybe this person needs to find a position because where they are is either it just isn't viable anymore. But it can be very stressful. Just keep in touch. That's all.
I would say openness and candor too, accept who you are as a worshiping people and be bold about that. Say, this is where we are, and this is maybe the expectation as we want to go to a certain place, or we have someone who wants to walk alongside us and to figure out what is next and discern with us. But don't sugarcoat things or hide things away. Be totally frank and honest about personalities or circumstances or situations, about the kind of resources that you have, whether that's equipment and technology, whether it is the worship space, the organ and piano, however that is. Feel encouraged to be open and be totally honest about what your context looks like. That will benefit much more both parties in the search process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
one thing I just thought of, you wouldn't hire a pastor without looking at a video of him. So have that person send videos, which is a lot easier to do now than it used to be. Watch a video of them leading worship contemporary service. Watch them leading the traditional service. If they can take one of a choir rehearsal, great. Then you can see what they are doing during that rehearsal.
Well, and also likewise, the church can send the candidate videos of their worship gatherings, rehearsals, sort of things you can exchange, and because you're both really checking out each other to decide if it's a good fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, maybe what about the call weekend? Anything to add? It may look like many ministerial call weekends. Any particular nuances for this particular traditional modern worship leader pastor? Thoughts?
Yeah, I would say if you've arrived at the call weekend, you're probably in a really great position that you are going to welcome this person into your congregation as a leader in some capacity, hopefully. And so I think be hospitable in the call weekend, be open to them, let your candidate come in and work alongside whichever worship expression you're asking them to come be a part of, or both expressions. Have them do something in the worship service, lead the choir, lead the band, give a testimony about their own experience. Let them display their giftedness that they are coming to bring to your church.
I would say musicians are pretty opinionated, so ask their opinion on what they might like to be included, and also remember that leading one service is tiring and leading 2 services is exhausting. So make sure they have plenty of downtime within that period of time, that weekend, to kind of recuperate from all of the exertion of energy at the church.
Right.
Yep. I don't know that I have anything to add. Those are great.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. I hope that as someone out there, someone, a pastor, a staff team, a search committee who's watching this video, they actually may be more encouraged than discouraged. These kinds of folks are out there and they are gifted, but I think it does require a certain level of patience and persistence. And also, again, clarity within yourself as a local congregation. Maybe just a closing word, and then I'll wrap us up here. Tracy, you have a closing word for us?
I do, yes. I would say to the search committees and the pastor, have an idea of the kind of person that you want and the kind of role that you want them to play, but also be willing to be flexible. If you find the right person who is going to bring what you need for your congregation and for your worship ministry, you can tweak around which ensembles directly they lead, and you can tweak the job description, but it's hard to tweak. It's hard to tweak someone into being the right person. So just know what you want, but also be flexible with it and be willing to work with someone's strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Chip?
that's really good. We had kind of along that line, we had our organist of 30 years retired, and we were looking, and we had someone in the church that played. She wasn't as good as the person who left, but what she had was a great personality, and you could work with her.
Mm-hmm.
The best musician in the world won't overcome someone you can't work with.
Hmm.
So long story short, this person, her ability at the organ has just gone through the roof in the last 4 years. So what we had was the person, and it's really what you just said, Tracy. That's really the prime thing. Can you work with them, and how are they working with others? The rest of it can be brought along.
Yeah, it reminds me that my colleagues at the Center for Healthy Churches say, and they've actually got some data to back this up, that the greatest predictor of success in local church ministry is the emotional intelligence of the minister. We could spend another whole session on that, but I think that goes exactly to what both of you are saying. David, a final thought.
Yeah, I would just say be patient, be persistent, Doug, as you just said. You know, it may seem at times hopeless or like there's no one out there that might fit your context, but be patient in the search, listen for God's word and listen for God's spirit. And as you do this, be flexible. I think as Tracy said too, it's always great to find the right person, and you can shape and reimagine the role to benefit your congregation as best you need to. But be honest too about what you're looking for and the goals and the expectations that you have.
Yeah, well said. Thank you all for your time today. Thank you, Tracy and Chip and David. It's been a pleasure as always. I appreciate each of you. It was Robert Weber who was a very influential worship theologian in recent years. Sadly, Dr. Weber is no longer with us, who quipped, "All worship is local." And I've always thought there was such wisdom in that, because honestly, every congregational has its own story, its own context, its own history. And if your congregation worships God best in a traditional or liturgical style, wonderful. If your congregation worships the divine presence in a more modern or contemporary style, wonderful. And if you have the resources and the energy and the enthusiasm to do more than one style, because that's what works in your context, then wonderful. We all, though, need these. I would advocate that we need these pastoral musicians to help us be our very best and to bring out the best of the people resources that we have in those contexts. So if Polyphony Music Resources can help you along the way, we're happy to do that. I know these colleagues would be happy to help you as they can. And we are just praying that at the end of the day, that you worship God, the creator of us all, well. And so from us here at Polyphony, breathe, bless, and be well.